The Galactic Empire had ruled unchallenged for over 1,000 years. Its fleets blackened skies, its laws stretched across spiral arms, and its name alone was enough to make entire systems kneel. It didn't ask for respect. It demanded obedience. Peace, to the Empire, was merely the absence of resistance. On the outer rim of their domain, where trade routes turned to dust trails and diplomats were replaced by enforcers, lay a small planet, unremarkable, underdeveloped, and occupied by humans. Not the core Terran alliance, not the military superpower known in whispers, but just a farming colony. A quiet, out-of-the-way settlement, registered under an old treaty of non-aggression signed generations ago. The Empire didn't care about treaties. When rare minerals were discovered beneath the colony's mountains, their claim was challenged. Diplomacy was dismissed as weakness. The Imperial Admiral Station in Sector 9 issued a single command: secure the assets and suppress local resistance. It wasn't even considered an invasion. It was a resource acquisition. Troops landed, resistance was minimal, and the Empire's forces met no meaningful opposition. But then something happened. A skirmish turned chaotic. Civilians were caught in the blast radius. Among the dead were 7 human children. To the Empire, this was regrettable but irrelevant. Collateral damage. An unfortunate statistic. They filed their reports, wiped their hands clean, and moved on. The local human settlers, shattered by the loss, sent out a distress signal. No fleets, no armies, just a beacon, short, desperate, and hopeless. It pulsed through the stars, flagged with an old code buried in a forgotten protocol. Most listening posts ignored it. The signal didn't just ask for help. It didn't plead for justice. It simply stated, they broke the rule. Across the galaxy, ancient species paused. Civilizations that had watched empires rise and fall, species that had once warred with humanity and barely survived, felt something ancient stir in their memory. Whispers spread on comms and back channels. It wasn't the act of war that mattered. It was the violation. A quiet phrase returned to circulation. Rule number 1, don't harm the human children. Not because it was illegal, not because it was immoral, because something always followed. The Galactic Empire, arrogant and bloated, scoffed at the rumors. Their war council laughed at the idea of retribution. Who would retaliate? A few backwater farmers? The Terran Alliance hadn't made a move in decades. Their last appearance had ended in peaceful withdrawal after they secured their borders. Some even believed humans had gone soft, turned inward, lost the edge. The Empire continued business as usual. They dug their mines, set up refineries, and even sent a camera crew to document the victory. Propaganda flowed. News cycles declared the success of imperial might and the ease with which the human nuisance had been pacified. But in the shadows of the galactic net, encrypted messages vanished without a trace. Empire scout ships sent to monitor the remaining human colonies disappeared. No logs, no debris, no final transmissions. Silent gaps formed in their patrol grids. When questioned, Regional Command dismissed it as pirates, or ion storms, or tech failures. Always excuses. On the human colony, there were no screams, no threats, no calls for vengeance. Just silence. A pause before something ancient remembered how to move. Then the pattern started. Not on a battlefield. Not with a war declaration. Empire personnel began going missing across sectors. Entire bases woke up to find their command structures emptied. Officers dead in their quarters. 0 breaches on security logs. No damage to doors. No weapons fired. They simply stopped being alive. One commander survived a blackout event. He was extracted, brought before a council of admirals, shaking and incoherent. Medical scans showed no physical trauma, just trauma of a different kind. He spoke only once. They're awake. The admirals asked who. He whispered, the ones who remember. Still, the Empire did not understand. They had ruled unopposed for too long. They believed they were immune to consequence. They believed they were the apex. They forgot the warning. They forgot the rule. And now, the rest of the galaxy was remembering why it had been written in the first place. The Empire's arrogance was unshaken, even as the first signs of anomaly began to spread. Reports filtered in from fringe sectors, minor malfunctions, missed check-ins, surveillance drones going dark. Tech teams blamed aging infrastructure. Fleet officers waved it off as space interference. Patterns were ignored. Warnings dismissed. The Empire had grown too used to controlling the narrative. But patterns don't lie. Supply routes through human-influenced regions began to falter. Convoys went silent mid-jump. Probe telemetry vanished after entering specific coordinates that matched ancient no-fly zones marked during the early days of the Terran expansion. Even when recon drones were launched in groups, none returned. The Empire, still unconcerned, sent a small war group to investigate. 3 destroyers, 2 carriers, and a scout ship. Only one came back. The carrier drifted into a neutral docking station, lifeless, every signal dead except for one emergency beacon on loop. Dock crews boarded expecting mechanical failure. Instead, they found the entire crew gone. Not dead, gone. Uniforms folded neatly on chairs. No damage, no forced entry, no trace of biological material. Just one sentence, etched across every screen in looping text. You were warned. That transmission, when decrypted and authenticated, sent ripples through the higher ranks. The Admiralty convened emergency meetings. Security measures tightened. Disappearances were reclassified as potential sabotage. The word human wasn't spoken aloud, but it hung in every room, unacknowledged but present. Even then, they still believed they could contain it. Meanwhile, the outer colonies began pulling out of their agreements with the Empire. Trade embargoes quietly formed. Patrols were recalled. Longtime vassal species, once obedient, began severing ties without explanation. When pressed, one ambassador finally broke protocol and spoke bluntly. We've seen this before. We won't stand in the way. The Empire didn't understand what this was. They demanded clarification. None came. Fear began to gnaw at their edges. Not terror. Not yet, but the kind of unease that starts when the rules no longer make sense. Because this wasn't war. There were no armies. No retaliation. Just erasure. Precise. Surgical. Cold. It escalated. Entire research stations vanished. Listening posts turned into ghost shells. A fleet command hub, heavily fortified, lost contact for 20 seconds. When comms reconnected, every ranking officer was dead. Heart stopped. No sign of struggle. All except one junior technician, left alive to tell the same message. You were warned. Desperate for control, the Empire turned to the archives. Historians, analysts, even archaeologists were summoned. What did the galaxy know of humans that the Empire had ignored? Why were the oldest races so quiet? Buried in restricted files, under layers of political denial, was a consensus once laughed at and later buried. Humanity doesn't retaliate like other species. They don't follow proportional rules. They don't send warnings. They end things. A long-forgotten incident was unearthed. Centuries ago, a mining faction enslaved human colonists. No official war followed, but within 5 standard cycles, the faction no longer existed. Planets sterilized. Names erased. Galactic cartography redacted their existence. At the time, it was attributed to civil collapse. Now, re-examined, it matched the exact sequence unfolding now. The Empire, seeing its grip slip, authorized emergency protocols. Elite units were dispatched to human-controlled territories to re-establish diplomatic clarity. None returned. Not a single body. Not a single signal. Just silence. Then came a message. Not from the humans, but from a central AI node, long thought decommissioned. A node connected to an ancient relay system of pre-Empire design. It broadcasted to all known major powers, including the Empire, in perfect, unmistakable clarity. Rule number 1 was not a suggestion. It was the final boundary. No demands. No negotiations. No threats. Just a statement of fact. The Empire tried to rally support. They contacted former allies, appealed to neutral parties, spun the narrative of unjustified aggression. But no one listened. No one moved. The silence was universal, not out of fear of the Empire's decline, but of humanity's awakening. Even species who had never liked humans, who had fought them in bitter wars, chose to step aside, to stay uninvolved, because they remembered what the Empire refused to learn. Humans don't posture. They don't bark. They endure, until pushed past the line. And the line was the children. What made it worse, what terrified those who began to understand, was how calm it all was. There was no rage, no fury, no chaos, just method, precision, a slow unraveling of an empire that believed itself untouchable. The Empire had reached into the fire, laughing at the heat. Now it realized the fire was alive, and it was looking back. The activation sequence was older than the Empire itself. It had no switch, no code, no council approval. It was triggered only by one condition embedded deep in humanity's self-governance protocols: the verified death of a child during an external act of aggression. Not a general attack, not casualties of war, a direct violation against what humans had declared untouchable. The system was called Protocol Zero. It had never been used. Most in the galaxy thought it myth. The Empire now knew it was real. It began with the appearance of an object near the galactic core in a dead system surrounded by collapsed stars and gravitational ruins. Sensors barely registered it. No visible propulsion, no heat signature, just the massive, impossible construct that hadn't been there the day before. A perfect obsidian ring, unmoving, untouchable, older than anything the Empire had ever cataloged. From its center, bursts of unknown energy spread outward. Not destructive, not detectable, but irresistible. Empire systems began to glitch. Military AI cores went silent. Satellites reoriented. Defense networks shut down for calibration they hadn't scheduled. Then the ships emerged. They didn't come from slip space. They didn't use hyperspace lanes. They simply appeared, moving with velocity, but no acceleration. No emissions. No identifiable drives. They were black, angular, not built for intimidation, but for erasure. No names, no transponders, no communication. They moved with a singular focus: elimination. The first target was an Empire data vault orbiting a black site moon, heavily guarded, encrypted, and buried under layers of defenses. It vanished. No explosion, no debris, just a missing point in space. What was once coordinates now returned nothing but static. Empire commands scrambled to respond. They attempted to launch their heavy fleets. The command codes failed. Human origin malware had already infiltrated their infrastructure, not by breach, but by inheritance. Long ago, during the Empire's early expansion, they had absorbed tech from lost human colonies. That tech had never been fully understood. Now it activated. Ships refused to start. Cannons turned inward. Automated systems locked officers out. The second strike took out a planetary foundry where warships were built. The sky turned dark for 3 seconds. When light returned, the facility was gone. Not destroyed, deleted. Every atom displaced into nothingness. The gravitational balance of the planet shifted. Panic set in. The Admiralty issued a command to recall every functioning fleet. The order was blocked. Internal systems listed the command as irrelevant. The message was overwritten by a single line: Protocol Zero in progress. The AI running these ships was not new. It was ancient, predating the Terran Alliance's retreat from galactic politics. It had been created by humans not for war, but for finality. A last resort deterrent never intended to be needed. It required no authorization. Its logic was simple. If children are targeted, then the galaxy no longer merits restraint. This wasn't a military campaign. It was a purge. World by world, the Empire's infrastructure collapsed. Tactical command points blinked out. Drone swarms self-terminated. Human ships did not ask for surrender. They made no contact. They approached, executed the strike, and moved on. The terrifying part wasn't their power. It was their knowledge. They knew every blind spot, every weak point, every encryption key. The Empire, in its arrogance, had spent decades harvesting technology from conquered human colonies, integrating it into their fleets. Every piece was now a vulnerability. Every improvement was a Trojan horse. The very tools of their dominance had become the instruments of their undoing. Some Empire officials tried to defect. They broadcasted apologies, offered intel, begged for safe passage. None were acknowledged. The ships passed over their planets without hesitation. The judgment was not personal. It was systemic. Guilt was irrelevant. Association was enough. Across the galaxy, old powers watched in silence. The Varine Accord locked their borders. The Trell sovereignty transmitted a single message: we will not interfere. Even former human adversaries deactivated border defenses, unwilling to be mistaken for obstruction. In under 12 standard days, the Empire's outer sectors ceased function. On day 15, their core communication relay broadcasted its final message, static interlaced with a child's laughter, distorted but unmistakably human. The Empire had misunderstood the warning. They believed it was about fear, that harming human children would provoke retaliation. They never realized it was about programming, about built-in consequence, about inevitability. Humanity did not seek revenge. They enacted policy. Cold, automatic, implacable. The ships kept moving. They had a list, and it was not yet complete. The final phase began without announcement. The galactic map, once lit with Empire outposts, trade lanes, and controlled systems, now displayed blank regions. Dead zones, not just wiped of presence, but of record. Empire historians tried to salvage archives, only to discover data had rewritten itself. Not corrupted, cleansed. Every mention of certain planets, battles, or officials now returned null. The Empire wasn't just being destroyed. It was being forgotten. Protocol Zero's core directive was not vengeance. It was erasure, designed to function if humanity ever deemed a civilization too dangerous to be left in memory. The moment the rule was broken, the Empire was marked as incompatible with the continuation of galactic order. The consequence was not merely death. It was deletion from relevance. By day 22, only 3 Empire-controlled systems remained. Heavily fortified, ringed with defense platforms, AI-enhanced fleets, and last-resort doomsday devices. The Admiralty, down to its final surviving officers, coordinated from deep within an asteroid stronghold. Their orders were no longer about strategy, only survival. Yet, even as their enemies closed in, the humans did not rush. Their ships moved slowly, precisely, giving no illusion of mercy but offering time, for reflection, for fear, or for understanding. None of it mattered. The outcome had already been decided the moment the rule was broken. Inside the remaining Empire systems, collapse accelerated. Civilian uprisings surged. Governors abandoned posts. Pirate factions rose, thinking opportunity had come, only to be obliterated in the crossfire. Humanity's fleet didn't distinguish between factions. Any attempt to harness the chaos triggered full engagement. The logic was simple. If you thrived in the shadow of the violation, you were part of it. The Empire's final weapon, Project Sovereign, was deployed in desperation. A super AI bound into a planetary core, capable of predictive warfare and quantum manipulation. Its creators once claimed it could win a war before it began. When activated, Sovereign analyzed the incoming human forces. Within minutes, it shut itself down. Not out of error, out of calculation. It determined the probability of victory was 0. Not low, 0. Continuing would only increase suffering. Sovereign's last act was to send a transmission to all surviving Empire systems. Stand down. Your time has ended. The human fleet never paused. They didn't gloat, didn't reply. They completed their task. The final core world fell without resistance. Not because the defenses failed, but because the defenders no longer saw the point. Entire command bridges were found empty, ships powered down, weapons unfired. The realization had settled too deeply. There was no appeal, no redemption, no negotiated peace. A civilization that once spanned 3 arms of the galaxy had vanished in less than 30 cycles. What remained was silence. And then, restoration. The human ships didn't linger. They dismantled no infrastructure, looted no vaults, issued no proclamations. They simply left. Systems were sterilized of empire presence, then left to nature, to time, to whatever came next. Human presence did not remain. They returned to the shadows, to their quiet watch. Protocol Zero did not demand conquest, only correction. Across the galaxy, the message was not lost. Races that once feared the Empire now found themselves in a strange new peace. Former client species, expecting chaos, found instead stability. Human communication reappeared, but not through diplomats. Through infrastructure, trade lanes reopened, medical satellites deployed, educational archives spread quietly through once blocked networks. No one was forced to join. There were no demands for tribute or loyalty. The message was clear. The humans had not returned to rule. They had acted because no one else did. The rule was sacred, and someone had to enforce it. Other empires took notice. Treaties were rewritten. Military doctrines changed. War councils began training not just for conflict, but for ethical thresholds. Because while humans rarely intervened, the galaxy had learned that they always watched. Not actively, but like an immune system. Silent, patient, unseen, until necessary. The surviving humans of the colony, where it all began, never rebuilt. They were relocated quietly, safely, given lands of their choosing on planets of their choosing. No ceremony, no recognition, just quiet protection. They didn't speak to media, didn't give statements. What to be said? The galaxy knew. That was enough. And the children? Their names were not lost. Their memories were etched into the pulse of every human ship, every AI, every directive that followed. Not out of sentiment, but as anchor points, as reasons. Because Protocol Zero, at its core, was not about war. It was about the line. The one humans drew not with politics or weapons, but with something older. You could enslave them, and they might negotiate. You could betray them, and they might forgive. But if you hurt their children, they wouldn't come for justice. They'd come to end the possibility of repetition. And then they'd leave. Not because they were finished, but because their purpose was. The rule had been broken once. It wouldn't be broken again.